Close your eyes and imagine the vast Nevada desert stretching endlessly beneath a canvas of midnight stars. The Mojave winds whisper ancient secrets across the alkali flats, carrying with them stories that have never been told, stories that governments would prefer remain buried beneath layers of sand and classification stamps. Here, where the earth meets the sky in an infinite horizon, lies a place that has captured the world's imagination for decades. It is a place where reality blurs with the impossible, where the line between science fiction and science fact becomes as thin as desert air. This is Area 51, officially known as Groom Lake, a name that sounds as innocuous as a summer vacation destination, yet harbors mysteries that have spawned 1,000 conspiracy theories. The desert here is different from other places. During the day, it burns with an intensity that seems to sear secrets into the very ground. But at night, the temperature drops and the landscape transforms into something ethereal, almost otherworldly. The silence is so profound that it seems to have weight, pressing down on everything beneath the star-drunk sky. It was in this desert, in 1955, that the United States Air Force decided to build something extraordinary. They needed a place so remote, so utterly cut off from prying eyes, that they could test aircraft that pushed the boundaries of what humans thought possible. The Atomic Energy Commission had divided this massive tract of land into numbered areas, and Area 51 was just one of many. But somehow, this particular patch of desert would become the most famous secret in the world. The facility sits on the edge of Groom Lake, a dry lake bed so flat and perfect that it serves as a natural runway stretching for miles. From above, if you could somehow breach the restricted airspace without being intercepted by fighter jets, you would see a collection of hangars, runways, and buildings that look surprisingly ordinary for a place that supposedly houses the impossible. But beneath this mundane surface, legend tells us, lies a labyrinth of underground facilities stretching deep into the earth. The locals in nearby towns, like Rachel, Nevada, population 98, on a good day speak in hushed tones of strange lights dancing in the sky, of aircraft that move in ways that defy physics, of sounds that seem to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The desert remembers everything. It remembers the first atomic tests that lit up the sky like false dawns. It remembers the spy planes that flew so high they were mistaken for visitors from other worlds. And it remembers the man who would change everything. Man whose story would either expose the greatest secret in human history or become the most elaborate hoax ever perpetrated. As you settle deeper into your pillow tonight, consider this. What if the desert's secrets are not just about advanced aircraft or military experiments? What if, buried beneath the sand and secrecy, lies evidence that we are not alone in this vast universe? The story of Area 51 cannot be told without the story of Bob Lazar, and Bob Lazar's story cannot be understood without first understanding the place where he claims his extraordinary journey began. So let the desert wind carry you deeper into this mystery, where truth and fiction dance together like heat mirages on summer sand, and where the answer to humanity's greatest question might be hidden in plain sight. What secrets does this desert hold? And why are they so desperately protected by men in black SUVs and fighter jets that appear faster than thoughts? Chapter 2: The Birth of Secrecy in the Depths of the Cold War. When the world teetered on the brink of nuclear annihilation and every shadow could hide an enemy agent, the United States found itself in need of absolute secrecy. The year was 1955. And President Eisenhower had authorized the construction of what would become the most classified facility on Earth. The genesis of Area 51 was born from necessity and fear. The Soviet Union was developing weapons and aircraft at an alarming pace, and America needed to respond with technology so advanced, so revolutionary, that its very existence had to be hidden from the world. The CIA, working with Lockheed's Skunk Works division, required a place where they could test the U-2 spy plane and aircraft designed to fly higher than any Soviet missile could reach. Kelly Johnson, the legendary aircraft designer, personally flew over the Nevada desert in a small plane, searching for the perfect location. When he saw Groom Lake, he knew immediately that they had found their secret garden. The dry lake bed provided a natural runway longer than any airport in the world, and the surrounding mountains created a natural bowl that would hide their activities from prying eyes. But secrecy at this level required more than just remote geography. It required the creation of an entirely parallel world, complete with its own transportation system, its own communication networks, and its own rules that existed outside the normal boundaries of American law. This shadow world would operate in the spaces between official acknowledgement and plausible deniability. The workers who built Area 51 lived in a strange twilight existence. Each morning, they would gather at a secret terminal at Las Vegas's Nellis Air Force Base, board unmarked aircraft, and fly into what officially didn't exist. They carried no identification that mentioned their true destination. Their paychecks came from companies that existed only on paper. Their families were told they worked on classified defense projects in Nevada, nothing more. The aircraft that emerged from this desert sanctuary were marvels that seemed to bend the laws of physics. The U-2 flew so high that pilots had to wear spacesuits. Later came the SR-71 Blackbird, which could outrun its own sound and flew faster than a rifle bullet. These machines were so advanced that when they were first tested, civilian air traffic controllers and commercial pilots began reporting strange, high-altitude objects that moved in impossible ways. The government faced a dilemma. They couldn't explain these sightings without revealing their most classified projects, so they chose silence. This silence, perhaps inevitably, gave birth to speculation. If the government wouldn't say what people were seeing in the skies above Nevada, then perhaps what they were seeing was something even more extraordinary than advanced aircraft. UFO sightings increased dramatically throughout the 1950s and 1960s. Many of them clustered around Nevada's desert regions. The Air Force, bound by secrecy oaths, could neither confirm nor deny these reports. They found themselves in the peculiar position of allowing their own test flights to fuel speculation about visitors from other worlds rather than risk. Exposing their classified programs, by the 1970s, Area 51 had become a ghost story told in whispers. Former workers, bound by security clearances that lasted decades, could only hint at what they had seen. They spoke of aircraft that could hover motionless in the air, of propulsion systems that made no sound, of materials that seemed to absorb light itself. The facility expanded underground, with rumors of levels descending deep into the desert floor. Some said there were hangars large enough to house aircraft with wingspans measured in hundreds of feet. Others whispered of laboratories where scientists studied materials that didn't appear on any periodic table. And then, in the late 1980s, everything changed. The Cold War was ending. The Soviet threat was diminishing, and the wall of secrecy that had protected Area 51 for over 3 decades began to show cracks. It was through one of these cracks that a man named Bob Lazar would emerge, carrying with him a story so extraordinary that it would either expose the greatest cover-up in human history or become the most compelling science fiction ever, presented as fact. As you drift towards sleep, consider the weight of secrets. In a democracy, how long can the extraordinary remain hidden? And what happens when someone decides that the truth, no matter how impossible it seems, deserves to see the light of day? The birth of secrecy at Area 51 set the stage for everything that would follow. But every secret, no matter how well protected, eventually finds a way to surface. The question is not whether the truth will emerge, but what that truth will reveal about our place in the universe. Chapter 3. The Man Who Stepped Out of the Shadows. In the spring of 1989, the comfortable mythology surrounding Area 51 was shattered by a man who claimed to have seen the impossible with his own eyes. His name was Robert Scott Lazar, though the world would come to know him simply as Bob Lazar. And his story would either expose the greatest secret in human history or demonstrate the incredible power of a compelling lie. Imagine, if you will, a man living an ordinary life in Las Vegas, Nevada. Bob Lazar was, by all external appearances, unremarkable tinkerer, an entrepreneur, someone who ran a small business dealing in scientific equipment. He had the demeanor of a man comfortable with technology, the kind of person who could disassemble a radio and put it back together while carrying on a conversation about something entirely different. But, on a warm desert evening in May 1989, this unremarkable man would make a decision that would change his life forever. He contacted George Knapp, a reporter for the local CBS affiliate, KLAS-TV, with a story that seemed to come straight from the pages of science fiction. He claimed to be a physicist who had worked at a facility called S4, located near Area 51, where he had been tasked with reverse engineering propulsion systems from crashed extraterrestrial spacecraft. The story Lazar told was breathtakingly detailed. He described a facility built into the side of a mountain, with hangars doors that opened like garage doors cut directly into the rock face. Inside these hangars, he claimed, were 9 disc-shaped craft of unknown origin. These weren't the flying saucers of Hollywood imagination, they were elegant, seamless objects that seemed to be manufactured rather than assembled, as if they had been grown rather than built. Lazar's background, as he presented it, seemed to qualify him for such extraordinary work. He claimed to hold degrees in physics and electronic technology from MIT and Caltech, 2 of the most prestigious scientific institutions in the world. He said he had previously worked at Los Alamos National Laboratory, the birthplace of the atomic bomb, where his work had caught the attention of Edward Teller, the famous theoretical physicist known as the father of the hydrogen bomb. According to Lazar's account, Teller had recommended him for a position with EG&G, a defense contractor that provided technical services to the government. EG&G, Lazar explained, had assigned him to work at S4, where a small team of scientists was attempting to understand technology that was literally not of this world. The craft he worked on, which he dubbed the sport model because of its sleek, automotive-inspired design, was powered by an element that didn't exist on Earth's periodic table. He called it Element 115, and he described it as a heavy metallic substance that could manipulate gravity itself when properly utilized. This element, he claimed, was bombarded with protons in a particle accelerator, transmuting it briefly into element 116, which immediately decayed and released These antiprotons were then directed through a tube system to create a gravity wave that warped space-time itself. It was a story that combined cutting-edge physics with science fiction, presented by a man who seemed to understand the technical details intimately. Lazar didn't just describe what he had seen. He explained how it worked, drawing diagrams and speaking with the casual confidence of someone recounting a typical day at the office. But there were problems with Bob Lazar's story, problems that would plague his credibility for decades to come. When investigators looked for evidence of his claimed educational background, they found nothing. MIT and Caltech had no records of a Bob Lazar ever attending their institutions. His claimed employment at Los Alamos was partially verified. He appeared in the facility's phone book, but only as a subcontractor, not as the physicist he claimed to be. These discrepancies created a divide that persists to this day. Skeptics pointed to the lack of educational verification as proof that Lazar was a fraud, someone seeking attention or financial gain by fabricating an elaborate hoax. Believers countered that such records could easily have been erased by a government desperate to discredit someone who had revealed their deepest secrets. What made Lazar's story particularly compelling was not just what he claimed to have seen, but what he knew that the public didn't. In 1989, facilities like S4 were completely unknown to civilians. Janet Airlines, the mysterious fleet of white aircraft that transported workers to classified sites, was not common knowledge. The specific location of test sites within the Nevada test and training range was classified information. Yet Lazar described these details with casual accuracy, as if he had lived them rather than researched them. He knew the layout of facilities that officially didn't exist. He understood security procedures that were classified. He spoke with the insider's knowledge that could only come from direct experience or from access to highly classified information that would have been nearly impossible for a civilian to obtain. As you rest your head tonight, consider the enigma of Bob Lazar. Here was a man who stepped out of the shadows with the most extraordinary story ever told, yet who brought with him a mixture of compelling details and troubling contradictions. Was he a whistleblower trying to expose a cosmic secret, or was he a master storyteller who had crafted the perfect modern mythology? The man who stepped out of the shadows in 1989 would never be able to step back into them. His story would follow him for the rest of his life, making him either a hero to those who believed in government cover-ups or a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked imagination. But the story was only beginning. The claims Lazar made would be tested by time, by technology, and by the relentless scrutiny of both believers and skeptics. What remained to be seen was whether the man who claimed to have touched alien technology would be proven a prophet or exposed as a pretender. Chapter 4. The Skies That Whisper Above the Nevada Desert. The sky holds secrets that seem to shimmer just beyond human understanding. It is here, in the vast expanse of controlled airspace above Area 51, that witnesses claim to have seen things that challenge our most basic assumptions about what is possible in our universe. Bob Lazar's revelations in 1989 were accompanied by something unprecedented. He offered to prove his claims by telling people exactly when and where they could see the impossible for themselves. On specific Wednesday evenings, he said, test flights of the craft he had worked on would take place. These flights would be visible from a vantage point along the border of the restricted area, a stretch of desert that would come to be known as the Black Mailbox due to a solitary mailbox that marked the spot where believers gathered. Picture the scene: dozens of UFO enthusiasts, armed with folding chairs, coolers, and high-powered binoculars, sitting in the darkness of the Nevada desert. their eyes trained on a horizon that promised to reveal the impossible. The desert night is profound in its silent snow. City lights, no traffic noise, just the vast quiet of a landscape that seems to exist outside of time itself. And then, according to numerous witnesses, they saw them. Lights that moved in ways that violated everything they understood about aircraft. Objects that could hover motionless for minutes, then accelerate to incredible speeds in the blink of an eye. Craft that could make right-angled turns at velocities that would crush any human pilot, or stop instantaneously from what appeared to be supersonic flight. The witnesses described lights that seemed to pulse and change color, shifting from white to red to orange as they maneuvered through the night sky. Some reported seeing disc-shaped objects that appeared solid and metallic when illuminated by spotlights from the ground. Others spoke of triangular craft that moved in complete silence, their presence announced only by the way they blocked out the stars as they passed. Overhead, these weren't isolated incidents or ambiguous sightings. Multiple witnesses, often dozens at a time, were seeing the same phenomena simultaneously. Video cameras captured objects that moved in ways that seemed to defy physics. The consistency of the reports was remarkable. People who had never met, who came from different backgrounds and belief systems, were describing identical experiences, but the skies above Area 51 whispered more than just stories of strange craft. They spoke of a technology that seemed to operate on principles unknown to conventional science. The objects witnesses described displayed capabilities that pushed the boundaries of what even theoretical physics suggested might be possible. Consider the implications of what people claimed to be seeing. Craft that could manipulate gravity, vehicles that created their own localized distortions in space-time, propulsion systems that produced no visible exhaust and made no sound. If these observations were accurate, they suggested a level of technological advancement that was centuries beyond anything in the known human arsenal. The atmospheric phenomena reported around these craft were equally intriguing. Witnesses described shimmering effects in the air around the objects, as if the space itself was being warped or heated in ways that created visible distortions. Some reported feeling electromagnetic effects, watches stopping, car radios experiencing interference, compasses spinning wildly as the objects passed overhead. These electromagnetic disturbances were consistent with theoretical descriptions of how gravity manipulation might affect the surrounding environment. If a craft could create localized gravitational fields, it would necessarily involve enormous amounts of energy, and such energy expenditure would likely produce observable effects on sensitive electronic equipment. The flight characteristics reported were particularly compelling. Conventional aircraft are limited by the physical constraints of aerodynamics and the biological limitations of their human occupants. But the objects seen above the Nevada desert seemed to operate outside these constraints entirely. They could accelerate at rates that would be instantly fatal to any human passenger. Yet they showed no signs of being unmanned drones. Some witnesses reported seeing multiple craft operating in formation, performing coordinated maneuvers that suggested intelligence and purpose rather than random testing of experimental technology. These formations would separate and converge with mathematical precision, as if the pilots, if they could be called, that were demonstrating capabilities rather than simply testing them. The timing of these sightings was significant as well. They occurred during the period when Lazar claimed active testing was taking place, and they diminished after he made his public revelations, as if the testing schedule had been changed to avoid public observation. This pattern suggested either remarkable coincidence or genuine insider. knowledge on Lazar's part, weather conditions seemed to have no effect on the phenomena. The objects were observed in clear skies and during sandstorms, in perfect visibility and in conditions where conventional aircraft would be grounded. This suggested a level of technological sophistication that made terrestrial weather patterns irrelevant, or technology so advanced that it could operate effectively in any atmospheric conditions. As you close your eyes tonight, imagine standing in that desert darkness, looking up at stars so bright they seem close enough to touch. Imagine seeing something that moves among those stars in ways that challenge everything you thought you knew about physics, technology, and our place in the universe. The skies that whisper above Area 51 speak of possibilities that are either the greatest discovery in human history or the most persistent mass delusion ever documented. These whispered secrets from the Nevada sky raise questions that cut to the heart of human existence. Are we alone in the universe? Have we been visited by intelligences from other worlds? And if so, what does that mean for our understanding of ourselves and our cosmic significance? The sky remembers what it has witnessed, and the witnesses remember what they have seen. But memory, like starlight, can sometimes play tricks on us in the darkness, leaving us to wonder whether what we observed was reality or merely the reflection of our deepest hopes and fears. Chapter 5. The hidden network beneath the vast emptiness of the Nevada desert lies a web of connections so classified, so compartmentalized, that its very existence remained hidden from public view for decades. This is the infrastructure of secrecy, a network of facilities, transportation systems, and communication channels that operate in the shadows of official acknowledgement. Bob Lazar's claims didn't exist in isolation. They were supported by details about a hidden world that, piece by piece, would be revealed to be remarkably accurate. At the center of this network was a transportation system that seemed to emerge from the pages of a spy novel, Janet Airlines. The mysterious fleet of white aircraft that carried workers to places that officially didn't exist. Every morning, employees of the most classified programs in America would gather at a nondescript terminal at Las Vegas's McCarran Airport, now Harry Reid International Airport. Here, at the Janet Terminal, they would board aircraft with no commercial markings, no passenger windows, and no indication of their destination. These flights operated with the precision of a major airline and the secrecy of a covert operation. The aircraft themselves were civilian airliners, Boeing 737s and smaller commuter planes, in distinctive white livery with a simple red stripe. They carried no corporate logos, no flight numbers visible to the public, and no passenger manifests that could be accessed through normal channels. To outside observers, they were ghost flights carrying invisible passengers to destinations that didn't appear on any public map. Lazar described riding these flights as part of his daily commute to S4, the facility where he claimed to have worked on extraterrestrial technology. His knowledge of Janet Airlines, at a time when their existence was completely unknown to the public, provided compelling support for his claims of insider access. He knew details about the security procedures, the flight schedules, and the peculiar culture of secrecy that surrounded these operations. The passengers on these flights were a unique breed: engineers, technicians, and security personnel who had been cleared for the most sensitive programs in the American defense establishment. They lived double lives, telling their families they worked on classified defense projects, while revealing nothing about the true nature of their daily activities. Many held multiple security clearances at levels that most government employees never even knew existed. The network extended far beyond simple transportation. Communication between these facilities relied on encrypted channels that bypassed normal military and civilian networks. Supply chains for exotic materials and specialized equipment operated through front companies and shell corporations that existed only on paper. Financial transactions were buried in black budgets, so classified that even congressional oversight committees had only limited access to their details. EG&G. The company that Lazar claimed employed him was a perfect example of how this hidden network operated. Officially, EG&G provided technical services to the government, a description so vague it could cover almost anything. In reality, the company was deeply embedded in the most classified aspects of nuclear weapons development, advanced aerospace projects, and other programs that pushed the boundaries of known technology. The compartmentalization was extraordinary. Workers at these facilities often knew only the specific details necessary for their individual tasks. A technician working on propulsion systems might have no idea what other teams were working on just a few buildings away. This compartmentalization served both security purposes and psychological ones. It's much easier to keep secrets when you don't fully understand the context of what you're seeing. The facilities themselves were marvels of engineering designed for absolute secrecy. S4, the installation where Lazar claimed to have worked, was allegedly built into the side of Papoose Mountain, with hangar doors cut directly into the rock face. These doors were designed to be invisible from the air, camouflaged so effectively that even satellites couldn't detect them when closed. Underground connections linked various facilities across the Nevada test and training range. Rumors spoke of tunnel systems that allowed personnel and equipment to be moved between installations without ever appearing on the surface, where they might be detected by surveillance satellites or reconnaissance aircraft. These tunnels, if they existed, represented a massive engineering undertaking that would rival the construction of major subway systems. The communication networks that connected these facilities used technologies that were decades ahead of civilian systems. Encryption methods that wouldn't be declassified for public use until the 1990s were reportedly in use at these installations in the 1970s. Satellite communication systems provided secure links between Nevada facilities and installations around the world, creating a global network of classified sites that could share information instantaneously. Perhaps most intriguingly, the network included facilities for storing and analyzing materials that didn't fit into conventional categories. These materials, whether they were advanced composites developed for stealth aircraft, exotic alloys created for hypersonic flight, or something even more extraordinary, specialized storage conditions, and analysis equipment that existed nowhere else on Earth. The personnel who worked within this network were bound by security oaths that lasted decades beyond their employment. They signed agreements that prohibited them from discussing their work with anyone, including their spouses and children, under penalty of lengthy prison sentences. The psychological toll of carrying such secrets for decades created a unique subculture of individuals who share experiences they could never fully discuss with the outside world. This hidden network operated with budgets that dwarfed many small nations' entire defense expenditures. Money flowed through channels so complex that tracking specific expenditures became nearly impossible. Equipment that cost millions of dollars would appear and disappear from inventory without explanation, as if the normal rules of accounting and oversight simply didn't apply. As you drift toward sleep, consider the implications of such an extensive hidden infrastructure. If such networks could be constructed and maintained in absolute secrecy for decades, what else might be possible? The hidden network that supported Area 51 and its related facilities demonstrated that the American government possessed the capability to conceal massive operations from public view indefinitely. But every network, no matter how well concealed, eventually leaves traces. Documents get declassified, workers retire and tell stories, and technological advances make it harder to maintain absolute secrecy. The hidden network that Bob Lazar described would gradually be revealed to exist largely as he claimed, lending credibility to at least the infrastructure aspects of his extraordinary story. The question remained: if the network was real, what was it hiding? And if the government could successfully conceal such massive operations, what other secrets might still be buried beneath the Nevada sand? Chapter 6. The sports model in the deepest levels of the S4 facility. According to Bob Lazar's account, sat 9 disc-shaped craft that represented technology so advanced it seemed to come from another world entirely. Among these otherworldly vehicles, one stood out for its elegant simplicity and became the focus of Lazar's work. The craft he nicknamed the sports model. Imagine descending into an underground hangar carved from living rock. The walls smooth and artificial, lit by harsh fluorescent lights that cast sharp shadows across a scene that belonged more in science fiction than reality. The hangar doors, when open, revealed themselves to be cut directly into the mountainside, designed to be completely invisible from the air when closed. And there, sitting on what appeared to be a specialized support structure, was the sports model. The craft was approximately 52 feet in diameter and perhaps 16 feet tall at its center, with a dome rising from what would traditionally be called the top. But top and bottom seemed almost meaningless when applied to this vehicle, as it appeared designed to operate without regard to conventional orientations. The surface was seamless, as if the entire craft had been formed from a single piece of metal, no rivets, no welds, no visible joints or access panels. The metallic surface had a peculiar quality that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, giving the craft an almost organic appearance, despite its clearly artificial nature. The color was difficult to describe, a dark metallic hue that seemed to shift subtly depending on the angle of observation and the quality of light falling upon it. Some observers might have called it charcoal gray, others might have seen bronze or even a deep purple tint. What struck Lazar most forcefully about the sports model was its apparent lack of any visible propulsion system. There were no exhaust ports, no air intakes, no wings or control surfaces, none of the external features that characterized every aircraft he had ever seen. The craft appeared to generate lift and thrust through principles that were completely alien to conventional aerodynamics. The interior, accessed through what appeared to be a seamless hatch in the lower portion of the craft, was even more extraordinary. The pilot area contained seats that were clearly not designed for human occupants. They were too small, configured for beings significantly shorter than average humans. This detail, more than any other, convinced Lazar that the craft was of extraterrestrial origin. Why would human engineers design cockpit seating for occupants of non-human proportions? The control systems were equally mysterious. Instead of conventional switches, buttons, and displays, the interior featured what appeared to be touch-sensitive panels that responded to hand placement and pressure. There were no visible wires or circuit boards, no evidence of the complex electrical systems that would be expected in any human-built aircraft. The technology seemed to operate on principles that were completely foreign to terrestrial engineering. The power source for the sports model was perhaps the most fascinating aspect of all. Lazar described a reactor that was impossibly small by conventional standards, about the size of a basketball, yet capable of generating the enormous amounts of energy required for the craft's operation. This reactor utilized what he called Element 115, a super-heavy element that didn't exist on Earth's periodic table at the time of his revelations. According to Lazar's technical description, Element 115 served as both the fuel and the gravity generator for the craft. When bombarded with protons in a small particle accelerator, the element 115 would temporarily transmute into element 116, which would immediately decay and release These antiprotons were then channeled through a series of waveguides to 3 gravity generators positioned around the craft's perimeter. The gravity generators themselves were described as trumpet-shaped devices that could focus and direct gravitational fields with incredible precision. By creating asymmetric gravitational fields, the craft could effectively fall in any direction, achieving propulsion without reaction, mass, no fuel consumption, no exhaust, no violation of stealth, characteristics that would make the vehicle detectable to conventional sensors. This propulsion system explained many of the flight characteristics the witnesses reported seeing in UFO sightings. The ability to hover motionlessly, to accelerate instantaneously to incredible speeds, to change direction without regard to momentum or inertia. If the craft could manipulate gravity itself, it would be unaffected by the physical constraints that limited conventional aircraft. The implications of such technology were staggering. A craft that could manipulate gravity would essentially create its own reference frame, allowing it to accelerate at rates that would be instantly fatal to human occupants of conventional aircraft. The pilots, if they could be called that, would experience no G-forces, regardless of how dramatically the craft maneuvered, because they would be falling along with the gravitational field generated by their own vehicle. Lazar's technical drawings of the sports model showed a craft that was surprisingly simple in concept yet incredibly sophisticated in execution. The 3 gravity generators were positioned at equal intervals around the craft's perimeter, allowing for precise control of direction and attitude. The central reactor provided continuous power without the need for external fuel sources or regular maintenance cycles. The materials used in the craft's construction appeared to be metallic, but exhibited properties that didn't match any known terrestrial metals. The whole material seemed to be both incredibly strong and remarkably light, with the ability to withstand enormous stresses while maintaining structural integrity. Some sections appeared to be transparent or translucent, suggesting materials that could selectively allow certain types of radiation or energy to pass through while blocking others. Perhaps most intriguingly, Lazar claimed that the craft could operate in 2 distinct modes. In what he called Omicron configuration, all 3 gravity generators operated in parallel, creating a uniform gravitational field that allowed for smooth, controlled flight within planetary atmospheres. But in Delta configuration, the craft could focus all of its gravitational energy into a single, incredibly intense field that could bend space-time itself, theoretically allowing for faster-than-light travel. As you settle into sleep tonight, imagine touching a technology so advanced that it makes our most sophisticated aircraft seem primitive by comparison. The sports model, if it existed as Lazar described, represented a level of technological achievement that was literally centuries ahead of human capabilities. It was a machine that operated on principles we barely understand even today, using materials that don't exist in nature and powered by elements that we've only recently learned to create in microscopic quantities. But was the sports model real? Or was it the product of an extraordinarily detailed imagination? The technical descriptions were internally consistent and based on theoretical physics that, while speculative, wasn't entirely impossible. Yet the craft existed, if at all, in one of the most classified facilities on Earth, beyond the reach of independent verification or scientific study. The sports model remains the most compelling and most controversial aspect of Bob Lazar's story, a craft that could either prove we are not alone in the universe or demonstrate the incredible power of human imagination to create detailed alternate realities that feel more real than reality itself. Chapter 7, Element 115, Mystery. In the quiet halls of theoretical physics laboratories around the world, scientists have long dreamed of discovering elements that exist beyond the edge of the known periodic table. These superheavy elements, existing only briefly in the most sophisticated particle accelerators, represent the frontier of human knowledge about the fundamental building blocks of matter. But in 1989, Bob Lazar claimed to have worked with quantities of one such element 115 that would not be officially discovered by science for another 14 years. The story of element 115 begins in the realm of theoretical physics, where scientists predicted that certain super-heavy elements might possess unusual stability despite their enormous atomic weight. These theoretical islands of stability suggested that if such elements could be created in sufficient quantities, they might exhibit properties unlike anything found in nature. But creating even a few atoms of these elements required the most advanced particle accelerators on Earth, and the atoms that were created lasted mere milliseconds before decaying into lighter elements. Yet Lazar claimed to have worked with element 115 not in microscopic quantities measured in individual atoms, but in substantial amounts enough to power an alien spacecraft for what appeared to be indefinite periods. He described it as a heavy metallic substance with properties that seemed to violate our understanding of physics and chemistry. Most remarkably, he claimed that in its stable isotopic form, element 115 could amplify gravity waves, serving as the fuel for a propulsion system that manipulated gravity itself. The technical details Lazar provided about element 115 were sophisticated and internally consistent. He explained that the element served a dual purpose in the alien craft. It was both the fuel source and the gravity generator. When bombarded with protons in a small particle accelerator, the element 115 would briefly transmute into element 116, which would immediately decay and release These antiprotons would then be channeled through a series of waveguides to create and focus gravitational fields. This process, as Lazar described it, represented a level of technological sophistication that was almost incomprehensible. The ability to create and control antimatter in such quantities and with such precision was far beyond human capabilities in 1989 and remains largely beyond our reach today. The idea that a civilization could have developed portable antimatter reactors small enough to fit inside a spacecraft suggested a level of technological advancement that was centuries ahead of human achievement. But perhaps most intriguingly, element 115 was predicted to exist by theoretical physics. The concept of an island of stability among super-heavy elements was well established in nuclear physics, and element 115 was precisely in the range where such stability might be expected. For Lazar to have known about this specific element in 1989, years before its official discovery, suggested either remarkable foresight or access to information that wasn't publicly available. The scientific community's attitude toward element 115 changed dramatically in 2003 when researchers at the Joint Institute for Nuclear Research in Russia successfully created the first atoms of the element by bombarding americium-243 with calcium-48 ions. The element was officially recognized and named moscovium in 2016, confirming that Lazar's predictions about its existence had been accurate. However, the element 115 that scientists created bore little resemblance to the stable, abundant substance that Lazar described. The laboratory-created atoms lasted only milliseconds before decaying, and only a few atoms were produced in each experiment. The idea that such an element could exist in the stable, macroscopic quantities necessary to fuel a spacecraft remained purely theoretical. Lazar's descriptions of element 115's properties went far beyond what conventional physics suggested was possible. He claimed that, in its stable, isotopic form, the element could amplify gravity, waves a property that had no basis in established science. According to his account, the element could manipulate the fabric of space-time itself, creating localized gravitational fields that could be focused and directed with incredible precision. The implications of such properties were staggering. If element 115 could indeed manipulate gravity, it would represent a fundamental breakthrough in our understanding of the universe. Gravity, the weakest of the four fundamental forces, had always been the most mysterious. Unlike electromagnetic or nuclear forces, gravity could not be shielded or manipulated by any known technology. A substance that could control gravitational fields would essentially provide the key to the universe itself. Lazar's technical descriptions included details about how element 115 was stored and handled at the S4 facility. He described it as being kept in specially designed containers that maintained its stability through methods he wasn't fully briefed on. The element appeared to be completely inert under normal conditions, showing no signs of radioactive decay or chemical reactivity. Only when subjected to proton bombardment in the craft's reactor would it become active and begin producing the exotic effects necessary for propulsion. The manufacturing origin of this element 115 was perhaps the most compelling aspect of Lazar's account. He claimed that the quantities found at S4 could not have been produced by any known terrestrial technology. The amounts were simply too large, and the isotopic stability to perfect. This suggested that the element had been manufactured using technologies and processes that were completely unknown to human science. The storage and handling procedures Lazar described were consistent with dealing with both radioactive materials and substances of immense value. Access to the element 115 storage areas required multiple levels of security clearance, and the actual handling was performed by specialists wearing protective equipment that seemed designed for more than just radiation protection. According to Lazar's account, attempts to analyze the element 115 using conventional scientific instruments produced puzzling results. Spectrographic analysis showed absorption lines that didn't match any known elements, and the material's response to various forms of energy seemed to violate established physical laws. It was as if the element existed partially outside the normal framework of chemistry and physics. The reactor design that utilized element 115 was equally mysterious. Lazar described a device that was impossibly compact by human standards, yet capable of producing enormous amounts of energy with perfect efficiency. The reactor apparently produced no waste heat, no harmful radiation, and required no cooling systems or other support infrastructure. It simply converted the element 115 into pure energy with what appeared to be 100% efficiency. This level of energy conversion efficiency was theoretically possible only through matter-to-matter annihilation. But the reactor Lazar described bore no resemblance to any theoretical antimatter reactor design. Instead, it seemed to operate on principles that were completely alien to human understanding of nuclear physics and energy production. As you close your eyes tonight, consider the profound implications of element 115's existence. If Lazar's descriptions were accurate, this single element represented a technology gap so vast that human civilization might require centuries to bridge it. We had discovered how to create a few atoms of the element, but we were nowhere near understanding how to stabilize it, manipulate its properties, or harness its alleged gravitational effects. The element 115 mystery cuts to the heart of Bob Lazar's credibility. His accurate prediction of the element's existence, 14 years before its official discovery, was either an extraordinary coincidence or evidence that he had access to information far beyond what was publicly available in 1989, yet the properties he attributed to the element remained firmly in the realm of theoretical physics, unverified and perhaps unverifiable by current scientific methods. The element exists, that much has been confirmed by science. But whether it possesses the miraculous properties that Lazar described, or whether those properties exist only in the fertile imagination of a master storyteller, remains one of the most tantalizing mysteries in the entire Area 51 enigma. Chapter 8. Alleged alien remains in the deepest, most classified levels of the S4 facility. Bob Lazar claimed to have encountered something that challenged every assumption humans hold about their place in the universe. Physical evidence of non-human intelligence. According to his testimony, the 9 disc-shaped craft stored in underground hangars were not the only artifacts of extraterrestrial origin housed at the secret facility. There were also, he claimed, the preserved remains of the beings who had once piloted these impossible machines. Picture, if you will, a sterile laboratory environment carved from living rock, lit by the harsh glare of medical-grade lighting, where the boundaries between science and science fiction dissolve entirely. Here, in specially designed containment units, Lazar claimed to have seen proof that humanity was not alone in the cosmos. Biological specimens that represented evolution along an entirely different path. The beings, as Lazar described them, were small in stature, approximately 3.5 to 4 feet in height, with proportions that seemed almost childlike by human standards, yet clearly belonged to fully mature entities. Their heads were disproportionately large compared to their bodies, suggesting brain development that had followed a different evolutionary trajectory than terrestrial life forms. The most striking feature of these preserved specimens was their eyes, dark organs that seemed to dominate their facial features. These weren't the cartoon-like grey alien eyes popularized by science fiction, but sophisticated optical systems that appeared designed for conditions very different from those found on Earth. The size and structure suggested vision adapted for lower light conditions, or perhaps sensitivity to portions of the electromagnetic spectrum that human eyes couldn't detect. Their skin had a peculiar translucent quality, almost grayish in color, with a texture that appeared smooth, yet somehow alien to terrestrial biology. The specimens showed no evidence of body hair, external ears, or other features that characterized human anatomy. Their limbs were elongated and appeared surprisingly delicate, as if they had evolved in an environment with lower gravity than Earth. The hands were, perhaps the most intriguing, feature longer and more slender than human hands, with what appeared to be 4 fingers rather than 5. The digits were elongated and showed clear signs of advanced manual dexterity, suggesting a species that had developed sophisticated tool use and technology creation. The bone structure, visible through the translucent skin, appeared lighter and more delicate than human skeletal systems. Lazar's descriptions included details about the preservation methods used to maintain these specimens. The containment units appeared to use technologies that were unfamiliar to him, maintaining the specimens in what appeared to be perfect condition despite what must have been considerable age. The preservation was so complete that tissue samples could apparently still be extracted for analysis, providing researchers with fresh biological material from beings that may have died decades earlier. The biological analysis of these specimens, according to Lazar's account, revealed anatomy that was clearly non-terrestrial in origin. The internal organs were arranged differently than in human anatomy, with what appeared to be more efficient circulatory and respiratory systems. The brain structure, based on external examination, suggested cognitive capabilities that might have surpassed human intelligence, particularly in areas related to spatial reasoning and mathematical processing. Perhaps most disturbing to the researchers studying these specimens was the apparent cause of their deaths. According to the briefing materials Lazar claimed to have read, these beings had died in what appeared to be aircraft accidents crashes of the same type of disc-shaped craft that were being studied and reverse-engineered in the S-4 hangars. The implications were sobering. These advanced beings, despite their superior technology, were not immune to mechanical failures or pilot error. The documentation surrounding these specimens suggested that they had been recovered from crash sites in the American Southwest over a period of several decades. The most famous of these crashes, though never explicitly identified in Lazar's briefings, appeared to correlate with incidents that the public knew as the Roswell crash of 1947 and other similar events that had been dismissed as weather balloon accidents or misidentified military aircraft. The level of classification surrounding these specimens was extraordinary, even by the standards of the black world. Access was limited to a handful of researchers with specialized clearances, and even they were only allowed to study specific aspects of the specimens. No single researcher, according to Lazar's account, had complete access to all of the biological data that had been collected over the years. The storage facility housing these specimens was described as a medical laboratory that would not have been out of place in the most advanced civilian hospitals, but with security measures that far exceeded anything found in normal medical facilities. Multiple containment systems ensured that no biological material could be removed from the facility, and every action taken near the specimens was monitored and recorded by automated systems. The psychological impact on researchers exposed to these specimens was reportedly significant. Many required psychological counseling to process the implications of what they were studying. The reality of non-human intelligence, presented in such stark physical terms, challenged fundamental assumptions about humanity's place in the universe and the uniqueness of terrestrial evolution. The research being conducted on these specimens was apparently focused on understanding their biology, their possible origin, and any insights they might provide into the technology found in the crashed craft. The correlation between the being's physiology and the design of the spacecraft controls suggested a direct relationship, were not random artifacts, but were clearly connected components of a non-terrestrial technological civilization, according to Lazar's briefing materials. Attempts to determine the age of these specimens had produced puzzling results. Some appeared to be relatively recent, recovered within the past few decades, while others seemed much older, possibly dating back to crashes that had occurred in the early days of the UFO phenomenon. The preservation technology allowed specimens of vastly different ages to be maintained in identical condition. As you drift towards sleep tonight, consider the profound implications of such biological evidence. If non-human intelligence had indeed visited Earth, and if physical specimens had been recovered and studied, it would represent the most significant discovery in human history. The knowledge that we were not alone in the universe would fundamentally change our understanding of biology, evolution, and our place in the cosmic order. Yet these specimens, if they existed, remained locked away in the most classified facility on Earth, their existence denied by official channels and their study limited to a handful of researchers bound by the most restrictive security oaths imaginable. The alleged alien remains represented the ultimate proof of extraterrestrial visitation evidence, so compelling and so sensitive that it could never be revealed to the public without fundamentally altering human civilization. The question that haunted those who heard Lazar's account was simple yet profound. If these specimens were real, what did their presence on Earth mean for humanity's future? And if they were not real, why would someone create such elaborate and detailed descriptions of something that could never be verified or disproven? Chapter 9. The Price of Revelation. When Bob Lazar made the decision to speak publicly about what he claimed to have seen at S4, he crossed a line from which there would be no return. The price of revelation, he would discover, was far higher than he had ever imagined. His life would never again be private, never again be simple, never again be his own. The immediate aftermath of Lazar's 1989 television interviews was swift and decisive. Within days of his first appearance on KLA's TV, his life began to unravel in ways that seemed both systematic and personal. The job he had claimed to hold working on the most classified projects in human history vanished overnight. Records of his employment became mysteriously inaccessible. People who had known him professionally suddenly claimed no memory of ever meeting him. But the consequences went far beyond mere employment difficulties. Lazar found himself under surveillance that was both obvious and subtle, conducted by individuals who made no attempt to hide their presence, while simultaneously gathering information through channels he couldn't detect. His phone conversations were monitored, his mail was intercepted, and his movements were tracked with the precision of a military operation. The psychological pressure was immense. Imagine living every day knowing that your every action is being observed, every conversation recorded, every relationship analyzed for potential security implications. The weight of that constant scrutiny was designed to break down anyone who might be tempted to reveal additional classified information. It was a campaign of intimidation conducted with the full resources of the intelligence community. Lazar's personal relationships suffered enormously. Friends distanced themselves, unwilling to become collateral damage in what was clearly a conflict between one man and the most powerful secrecy apparatus in the world. His marriage, already under strain from the secrecy requirements of his alleged work, collapsed under the additional pressure of constant surveillance and media attention. Even casual social interactions became impossible when every new acquaintance might be an intelligence operative seeking information. The financial consequences were equally devastating. Lazar's scientific equipment business, which had provided his primary income, suffered as government contracts dried up, and civilian customers became wary of association with someone who had become a controversial public figure. The legal costs of defending himself against various charges, some seemingly legitimate, others apparently designed to discredit him, consumed what remaining resources he had. Perhaps most troubling were the criminal charges that began to appear with suspicious timing and questionable justification. In 1990, Lazar was arrested on charges related to pandering, allegedly connected to a prostitution operation. Later, he faced charges related to the sale of illegal chemicals. Critics pointed to these legal troubles as evidence of Lazar's lack of credibility, while supporters argued that they represented a pattern of harassment designed to destroy his reputation and silence his testimony. The media attention brought its own set of problems. Reporters camped outside his home, followed him to work, and pestered everyone who had ever known him for comments about his story. The coverage was often sensationalized, focusing more on the entertainment value of his claims than on their potential scientific or political implications. This tabloid treatment further damaged his credibility with serious researchers and scientists who might otherwise have been interested in investigating his claims. The scientific community's response was particularly painful for someone who claimed to be motivated by the pursuit of knowledge. Rather than engaging with the technical aspects of his story, most scientists dismissed his claims out of hand, citing his lack of verifiable credentials and the extraordinary nature of his allegations. The few researchers who showed interest in his story found themselves marginalized by their colleagues and faced career consequences for their curiosity. The isolation was profound. Lazar found himself caught between believers who wanted him to be there, prophet of alien visitation, and skeptics who wanted him to be exposed as a fraud. Neither group seemed interested in him as a human being, dealing with consequences that had spiraled far beyond anything he had anticipated when he first decided to speak out. The physical threats were real and concerning. Anonymous phone calls warning him to stop talking. Mysterious vehicles parked outside his home for hours at a time. And incidents of apparent sabotage to his car and equipment suggested that some individuals or groups were prepared to escalate beyond mere surveillance and harassment. Whether these threats came from official sources or from private individuals responding to his story was never clear, but their effect was undeniably intimidating. The impact on his family was perhaps the most devastating consequence of all. His parents found themselves thrust into a spotlight they had never sought, forced to deal with reporters, investigators, and curious individuals who wanted to know about their son's background and credibility. His relationships with siblings and extended family members became strained, as the controversy surrounding his story created divisions and forced people to choose sides. The long-term health effects of living under such pressure began to manifest over time. The constant stress, the disrupted sleep patterns caused by surveillance and media attention, and the social isolation took their toll on both his physical and mental well-being. Friends who knew him before his public revelations noted significant changes in his personality and behavior, as if the experience had fundamentally altered who he was as a person. Financial survival became a constant struggle, with his previous career effectively ended and his reputation making normal employment difficult. Lazar was forced to reinvent himself professionally. The scientific equipment business that had once provided a comfortable living was no longer viable, and he had to find new ways to support himself while dealing with ongoing legal expenses and the practical costs of living under constant scrutiny. The irony was profound. If Lazar's story was true, he had sacrificed everything to reveal what might be the most important information in human history. Yet the very act of revelation had made it impossible for him to provide additional evidence or pursue further investigation. If his story was false, he had destroyed his life for no reason beyond whatever temporary attention or financial gain. He might have received gains that were quickly overwhelmed by the long-term consequences of his actions. As you reflect on this tonight, consider the courage or foolishness required to make such revelations. Whether Bob Lazar was a whistleblower trying to expose cosmic truths, or a troubled individual seeking attention through elaborate fiction, the price he paid for his revelation was undeniably real. His life became a cautionary tale about what happens when an individual challenges the most powerful secrecy apparatus in the world. The price of revelation, once paid, could never be refunded. Bob Lazar's decision to speak out had transformed him from a private individual into a public figure, whose every action would be scrutinized, whose every word would be analyzed, and whose life would never again belong entirely to himself. The question remained, was the price worth paying? And if his story was true, what did society owe to someone who had sacrificed everything to reveal information that could fundamentally change humanity's understanding of its place in the universe? Chapter 10. The Watchers in the Deserton. The vast emptiness of the Nevada desert, where the horizon stretches endlessly in all directions and the silence is so profound it seems to have physical weight. There exists a network of observers whose job it is to ensure that certain secrets never see the light of day. These are the Watchers in the desert, men and women whose mission is to maintain the integrity of the most classified operations on Earth. No matter the cost, the security apparatus surrounding Area 51 and its related facilities represents one of the most sophisticated protection systems ever devised. It operates on multiple levels, from the obvious to the nearly invisible, creating overlapping fields of surveillance and control that make unauthorized access virtually impossible. But the Watcher's mission extends far beyond simply protecting physical facilities. They must also protect information, silence witnesses, and manage the delicate balance between maintaining operational security and avoiding actions that might themselves draw unwanted attention. The perimeter security is the most visible aspect of this system. Armed guards patrolled the boundaries of the restricted area in vehicles, equipped with the most advanced surveillance technology available. Motion sensors, infrared cameras, and seismic detectors create an invisible web that can detect intrusion attempts from miles away. The famous warning signs that threaten deadly force are not empty threats, represent a commitment to protecting classified operations that extends to lethal measures if necessary. But the real Watchers operate far from the perimeter, in the urban centers and small communities where the people who work at these facilities live their daily lives. These observers maintain surveillance on current and former employees, monitoring their communications, tracking their activities, and ensuring that the compartmentalized secrets of the black world remain compartmentalized. They are the invisible guardians of classified information, operating with budgets that rival those of small nations and authority, that extends into areas that most citizens would find deeply disturbing. The techniques used by these watchers evolved from decades of experience in intelligence operations around the world. Phone taps that leave no trace, mail interception that appears completely routine, and electronic surveillance that can monitor conversations through methods that seem like science fiction. They can track an individual's movements through credit card transactions, cell phone signals, and automatic license plate readers that have proliferated throughout American cities. The psychological profiles maintained by the watchers are extraordinarily detailed. They know the personal histories, the family relationships, the financial situations, and the psychological vulnerabilities of everyone who has ever had access to compartmentalized information. They understand how to apply pressure subtly, how to isolate individuals from their support networks, and how to make the consequences of speaking out seem far more threatening than the burden of maintaining silence. Bob Lazar's experience with these watchers began almost immediately after his first public statements. The surveillance was both obvious and covert, meant to intimidate him while also gathering intelligence about his activities, his contacts, and his state of mind. Phone calls that ended in silence, cars that appeared repeatedly in his neighborhood, and business associates who suddenly became unavailable, all indicated that he had attracted the attention of people whose job was to protect secrets at any cost. The watcher's approach to Lazar was sophisticated and multifaceted. Rather than simply silencing him through crude intimidation, they embarked on a campaign designed to destroy his credibility. Educational records disappeared, making it impossible to verify his claimed academic background. Employment histories became inaccessible, creating doubts about his professional qualifications. Legal troubles appeared with suspicious timing, providing ammunition for those who wanted to dismiss his story as the ravings of a criminal or attention-seeker. The network of watchers extends far beyond government employees. It includes contractors, consultants, and private individuals who provide services that government agencies cannot officially undertake. These private operatives can engage in activities that would be illegal if conducted by federal agents, operating in the gray areas where official oversight becomes difficult or impossible. The technology available to the watchers is decades ahead of what is available to civilian law enforcement or private security firms. Satellite surveillance that can read license plates from orbit, computer systems that can monitor internet traffic in real time, and communication interception capabilities that can capture and analyze millions of conversations simultaneously. They operate in the digital shadows, leaving no traces while gathering enormous amounts of information about anyone who might pose a threat to classified operations. The watchers also maintain extensive files on journalists, researchers, and activists who show interest in classified programs. These individuals find their phone calls monitored, their internet activities tracked, and their professional opportunities mysteriously limited. Sources dry up, documents become unavailable, and story assignments are killed without explanation. The message is clear: certain topics are off limits, and those who persist in investigating them will face consequences. The psychological toll on the watchers themselves is rarely discussed but undeniably real. They are required to maintain surveillance on American citizens who have committed no crimes beyond curiosity about their government's activities. They must destroy careers, break up families, and ruin lives in service of protecting secrets that may or may not be in the national interest. The cognitive dissonance required to perform such duties while maintaining belief in American values of freedom and democracy creates its own form of psychological damage. The legal framework that enables the watchers to operate is largely hidden from public view. Classification systems that allow virtually any activity to be declared a matter of national security. Surveillance authorities that bypass normal judicial oversight, and enforcement mechanisms that can destroy lives without ever involving formal criminal charges. The watchers operate in a legal netherworld where constitutional protections become meaningless and due process is a luxury that security considerations cannot afford. The effectiveness of the watchers is demonstrated by the rarity of significant leaks from the most classified programs. Despite employing thousands of people over decades, programs like those allegedly conducted at Area 51 have maintained their secrecy through a combination of compartmentalization, surveillance, and the credible threat of devastating consequences for those who violate their oaths. Yet, the watchers face an increasingly difficult challenge in the modern information age. Digital communications create permanent records that are difficult to completely erase. Satellite imagery from commercial sources makes it harder to hide physical facilities. And social media platforms make it easier for individuals to communicate without going through monitored channels. The tools that once guaranteed absolute secrecy are becoming less reliable, forcing the watchers to adapt their methods constantly. As you close your eyes tonight, consider the implications of such extensive surveillance capabilities. In a democracy, how much secrecy is justified in the name of national security? And when the watchers themselves operate in complete secrecy, who watches the watchers? The desert keeps its secrets not through the silence of empty spaces, but through the vigilance of those who have made it their mission to ensure that certain truths never emerge from the shadows. They are the invisible guardians of classified information, the faceless protectors of secrets that might change the world if they were ever revealed. But every secret, no matter how well protected, eventually finds a way to surface. The question is not whether the truth will emerge, but what that truth will reveal about the balance between security and freedom, between the public's right to know and the government's need to protect sources, methods, and perhaps even more extraordinary secrets that lie buried beneath the Nevada sand. Chapter 11. Skeptics lens through the cool, analytical eye of scientific skepticism. Bob Lazar's extraordinary claims about Area 51 and alien technology present a fascinating case study in how compelling narratives can emerge from a mixture of genuine knowledge, creative imagination, and the human tendency to believe in extraordinary explanations for extraordinary claims. The skeptical examination of Lazar's story begins with the most verifiable elements: his educational and professional background. When investigators attempted to confirm his claimed degrees from MIT and Caltech, they found no records, no classmates who remembered him, and no professors who recalled teaching him. For institutions that maintain meticulous records going back decades, the complete absence of any trace of Lazar's attendance is highly significant. The explanation that government agencies erased his educational records to discredit him fails to withstand scrutiny for several reasons. First, the complexity and scope of such an operation would be enormous, requiring the cooperation of multiple institutions, hundreds of individuals, and the alteration of thousands of documents and computer records. Second, Such an operation would leave traces people who remembered the erasure process, backup systems that contained the original information, or physical documents that couldn't be retrieved. No such evidence has ever surfaced. More importantly, the pattern of missing records is selective in ways that undermine the erasure theory, while his claimed degrees cannot be verified. Other aspects of his background, his attendance at Pierce Community College, his presence in the Los Alamos phone book, his various business licenses, remain intact and verifiable. If government agencies had the power and motivation to erase his educational credentials, why would they leave these other records untouched? The technical aspects of Lazar's story, while impressive in their detail and consistency, rely heavily on theoretical physics concepts that were becoming more widely known in the late 1980s. Element 115, gravity wave manipulation, and antimatter propulsion were all topics that appeared in scientific literature and science fiction works that an intelligent individual with scientific interests could have encountered. The predictions about element 115's existence, while accurate, were based on established theoretical frameworks that had been published in scientific journals years before Lazar's revelations. The flight characteristics that Lazar attributed to the alien craft he claimed to study were remarkably similar to UFO sightings that had been reported for decades. The ability to hover motionlessly, accelerate instantaneously, and make right-angled turns at high speed were standard features of UFO reports going back to the 1940s. Rather than revealing new information about extraterrestrial technology, Lazar's technical explanations seemed to provide theoretical justification for phenomena that were already part of UFO mythology. The timing of Lazar's revelations coincided with a period of renewed public interest in UFOs and government secrecy. The end of the Cold War was making previously classified military projects more accessible to researchers and journalists, and there was growing skepticism about government truthfulness following revelations about various covert operations. This cultural moment provided fertile ground for conspiracy theories and claims about hidden government programs. The psychological profile of someone who might create such an elaborate story is not difficult to construct. Lazar exhibited many characteristics common to individuals who fabricate complex narratives: above-average intelligence, familiarity with technical subjects, financial pressures that might motivate attention-seeking behavior, and a personality that enjoyed being the center of attention. The criminal charges he faced before and after his revelations suggested an individual who was comfortable operating outside legal and social norms. The inconsistencies in Lazar's story, while not individually conclusive, form a pattern that raises serious questions about his credibility. His inability to recall professors' names, his vague descriptions of his work at Los Alamos, and his shifting explanations for various aspects of his story all suggest someone who was improvising details rather than recounting genuine experiences. The scientific community's rejection of Lazar's claims was not based on prejudice or close-mindedness, but on the lack of extraordinary evidence required to support extraordinary claims. The principles of scientific inquiry demand reproducible results, peer review, and independent verification, none of which were possible with Lazar's story. Without physical evidence, without corroborating witnesses, and without any means of testing his claims, the scientific community had no choice but to treat his story as unsubstantiated speculation. The social dynamics surrounding Lazar's story also reveal patterns common to conspiracy theories and urban legends. True believers tended to dismiss contradictory evidence as part of the cover-up, creating an unfalsifiable belief system where any evidence against Lazar's claims was interpreted as proof that those claims were true. This circular reasoning made rational discussion impossible and turned Lazar's story into a matter of faith. Rather than empirical investigation, the media's treatment of Lazar's story often emphasized entertainment value over journalistic rigor. The dramatic nature of his claims made for compelling television and sold newspapers. But the lack of serious investigative follow-up meant that obvious questions were never adequately answered. The story became self-perpetuating through repetition rather than verification from a skeptical perspective. Lazar's story appears to be a sophisticated hoax that combined genuine insider knowledge about classified facilities with creative speculation about extraterrestrial technology. His familiarity with Area 51, Janet Airlines, and other classified programs could be explained by his limited work as a contractor, which gave him access to information that wasn't publicly available, but didn't necessarily involve exposure to alien technology. The lasting appeal of Lazar's story says more about human psychology than about the existence of extraterrestrial visitation. People want to believe that there are cosmic mysteries waiting to be revealed, that governments are hiding profound secrets, and that ordinary individuals can gain access to world-changing information. Lazar's story provides all of these elements in a package that feels plausible enough to be believable but extraordinary enough to be exciting. As you reflect on the skeptical analysis tonight, consider how easily compelling narratives can emerge when technical knowledge, creative imagination, and cultural desires intersect. The absence of extraordinary evidence for Lazar's extraordinary claims doesn't necessarily make him a deliberate hoaxer. He may genuinely believe aspects of his own story, as memory and imagination can blend in ways that make fiction feel like fact. The skeptical lens reveals Bob Lazar's story as a fascinating example of how myths are born in the modern age, not from ancient oral traditions, but from the intersection of classified government programs, theoretical physics, and the eternal human desire to believe that we are not alone in the universe. It remains one of the most compelling, unverified stories in the history of UFO research, precisely because it can neither be proven nor definitively disproven. The search for truth requires maintaining the balance between skepticism and open-mindedness, between the desire to believe extraordinary claims and the need for extraordinary evidence to support them. Chapter 12. Believers fire in the hearts of those who have looked up at the star-filled desert sky and seen things that challenge the very foundations of human understanding. Bob Lazar's story burns with the fire of truth. For believers, his account represents not just testimony about alien technology, but a courageous act of whistleblowing that revealed the most important secret in human history at enormous personal cost. The believer's perspective begins with a fundamental question. Why would someone destroy his life by fabricating such an elaborate story? Bob Lazar had everything to lose and nothing significant to gain by coming forward with his claims. He possessed a successful business, a stable life, and the anonymity that most people cherish. The decision to go public with his story transformed him overnight from a private citizen into a controversial public figure who would face decades of scrutiny, harassment, and ridicule. The financial motivation that skeptics often cite simply doesn't hold up to examination. While Lazar did eventually profit modestly from his story through documentaries and speaking engagements, these gains were vastly outweighed by the losses he suffered. His business was effectively destroyed, his personal relationships were ruined, and he faced enormous legal expenses defending himself against charges that appeared with suspicious timing after his revelations. More compelling than the absence of clear motivation for deception is the presence of verifiable elements in Lazar's story that couldn't have been known to the general public in 1989. His knowledge of S4, Janet Airlines, and the specific security procedures used at classified Nevada facilities was accurate in ways that couldn't be explained by research or guesswork. These weren't lucky guesses, they were detailed insider knowledge of operations that were completely unknown to civilians. The Element 115 prediction stands as perhaps the most remarkable vindication of Lazar's claims. In 1989, this element existed only in the theoretical predictions of nuclear physicists. Yet Lazar described its properties and behavior as if he had worked with substantial quantities of it. When Element 115 was officially created in 2003 and named Moscovium in 2016, it confirmed that Lazar had somehow known about the existence of an element that wouldn't be discovered by conventional science for another 14 years. The technical sophistication of Lazar's descriptions cannot be easily dismissed. His explanations of gravity, wave, manipulation, antimatter reactions, and space-time distortion were internally consistent and based on advanced physics principles that weren't widely understood in 1989. These weren't the wild fantasies of a science fiction enthusiast, were detailed technical descriptions that demonstrated deep understanding of theoretical physics and advanced engineering principles. The propulsion system, Lazar described gravity wave amplification using Element 115 provided explanations for UFO flight characteristics that had puzzled researchers for decades. The ability to hover motionlessly, accelerate instantaneously, and make impossible maneuvers finally made sense when viewed through the lens of gravity manipulation technology. Lazar didn't just describe what he had seen. He explained how it worked in ways that were consistent with established physics principles. The psychological evaluation conducted by private investigators hired to assess Lazar's credibility found no evidence of mental illness, pathological lying, or delusional thinking. Polygraph examinations, while not admissible in court, consistently indicated that Lazar believed he was telling the truth about his experiences at S4. These weren't the results expected from someone fabricating an elaborate hoax. The pattern of harassment and intimidation that Lazar experienced following his revelations was consistent with what would be expected if he had indeed exposed classified information of extraordinary sensitivity. The surveillance, the legal troubles that appeared with suspicious timing, and the systematic destruction of his reputation all suggested a coordinated effort to discredit someone who had revealed information that powerful interests wanted to remain hidden. The government's response to Lazar's claims was telling in what it didn't say as much as what it did. Rather than simply denying his allegations, officials chose silence or vague statements that neither confirmed nor denied the existence of the programs he described. This pattern of non-denials was consistent with standard operating procedures for responding to accurate revelations about classified programs. The witnesses who came forward to corroborate aspects of Lazar's story, friends who had accompanied him to observe the test flights, colleagues who remembered his work at Los Alamos, and other individuals who had knowledge of classified programs, provided supporting testimony that was difficult to dismiss. These weren't UFO enthusiasts seeking attention. They were credible individuals with their own reputations to protect who, nonetheless, confirmed key elements of Lazar's account. The physical evidence that Lazar provided, while limited, was nonetheless significant. His W-2 tax form showing payment from the Department of Naval Intelligence for work performed in Nevada was authentic and verifiable. This document proved that he had indeed received payment for classified work in the precise location where he claimed S4 was located. During the exact time period he described, the test flights that Lazar predicted would occur at specific times and locations were observed by multiple independent witnesses who had no connection to him or his story. These observers saw craft exhibiting the exact flight characteristics that Lazar had described: silent operation, impossible acceleration, and maneuvers that defied conventional aerodynamics. The consistency between his technical descriptions and the observed phenomena was remarkable. From the believer's perspective, the scientific community's rejection of Lazar's claims represented the same kind of institutional bias that has delayed acceptance of revolutionary discoveries throughout history. Scientists had rejected continental drift, bacterial causes of disease, and quantum mechanics when these theories were first proposed. The extraordinary nature of Lazar's claims didn't make them false. It made them threatening to established paradigms of knowledge and power. The of information within classified programs meant that most scientists had no access to the data necessary to evaluate Lazar's claims properly. The few scientists who worked within the black world were bound by security oaths that prevented them from commenting publicly, creating a situation where the only people qualified to assess the technical validity of Lazar's story were legally prohibited from doing so. The consistent attempts to discredit Lazar through character assassination, rather than factual refutation, suggested that his opponents couldn't address the substance of his claims. If his story was simply false, it should have been easy to disprove through evidence rather than through attacks on his personal credibility. The focus on his educational background and legal troubles seemed designed to distract from the technical and factual elements of his testimony. The broader context of government secrecy and disinformation campaigns provided a framework for understanding why Lazar's story faced such fierce opposition. If alien technology was indeed being studied at classified facilities, its revelation would represent the greatest intelligence failure in human history. The political, religious, and economic implications of such a discovery would be so enormous that any government would feel compelled to maintain secrecy at any cost. The believer's fire is fueled by the recognition that extraordinary claims require extraordinary courage to make public. Bob Lazar faced ridicule, harassment, legal troubles, and social ostracism for sharing information that, if true, represented the most important revelation in human history. The personal cost he paid for his revelations was real and devastating, suggesting a level of commitment that would be inexplicable if his story were merely fabricated. The technology that Lazar described, gravity manipulation, antimatter propulsion, and space-time distortion, represented theoretical possibilities that mainstream science acknowledged as plausible, even if they were far beyond current human capabilities. The idea that such technology might have been developed by non-human intelligences was extraordinary but not impossible, and the technical details Lazar provided were sophisticated enough to suggest genuine familiarity with advanced physics principles. The evolution of Lazar's story over time showed remarkable consistency, rather than the kind of elaboration and contradiction that would be expected from a fabricated account, despite decades of scrutiny and countless opportunities to embellish his claims. Lazar maintained the same basic narrative with the same technical details, suggesting that he was recounting actual experiences rather than creating fictional ones. The cultural impact of Lazar's revelations, inspiring countless researchers, investigators, and truth-seekers to continue pursuing evidence of extraterrestrial visitation, demonstrated the power of his testimony to transform human consciousness about our place in the universe. Whether or not every detail of his story was accurate, his willingness to speak out had opened minds to possibilities that had previously been dismissed as science fiction. For believers, Bob Lazar represents a modern-day Galileo, challenging the established orthodoxy with observations that threatened comfortable assumptions about reality. Like Galileo, he faced persecution and ridicule from the scientific establishment, but history might eventually vindicate his courage in revealing truths that were too extraordinary for his contemporaries to accept. As you rest tonight, consider the possibility that sometimes the most important truths come from the most unlikely sources. The believer's fire burns with the conviction that Bob Lazar's story, despite its controversies and contradictions, contains elements of truth so profound that they could reshape humanity's understanding of its place in the cosmos. The fire of belief illuminates possibilities that skepticism alone cannot explore. It asks us to consider that the universe might be far stranger and more wonderful than our current understanding suggests, and that the testimony of one man who claimed to have touched alien technology might be the key that unlocks the greatest mystery of all. Are we alone? In the desert nights of Nevada, when the stars seem close enough to reach, believers continue to watch the skies, waiting for confirmation that Bob Lazar's impossible story was against all odds. True. Chapter 13. The Modern Echo in the Digital Age of the 21st Century. Bob Lazar's story has taken on new dimensions and found new audiences, echoing through social media, podcasts, and documentaries with a persistence that suggests either enduring truth or compelling mythology. The modern era has brought both new evidence and new scrutiny to claims that originated in the analog world of 1989. The technological revolution has transformed how Lazar's story is investigated, discussed, and understood. High-definition cameras, advanced image analysis software, and sophisticated detection equipment have given modern UFO researchers tools that were unimaginable when Lazar first went public. Yet paradoxically, this same technology has made it easier to create convincing hoaxes and harder to distinguish authentic phenomena from carefully crafted deceptions. Satellite imagery, now available through commercial services, has allowed independent researchers to study Area 51 and surrounding facilities with unprecedented detail. These images have revealed extensive construction and expansion at Groom Lake, underground facilities that match some of Lazar's descriptions, and aircraft that appear to utilize unconventional propulsion systems. While these observations don't prove the existence of alien technology, they do confirm that extraordinarily advanced aerospace development continues at these classified facilities. The Internet has created a global community of researchers who collaborate in ways that were impossible in Lazar's era. Forums, video channels, and social media groups dedicated to analyzing his claims have emerged, bringing together individuals with diverse technical backgrounds who can evaluate the scientific and engineering aspects of his story with unprecedented sophistication. Some of these analyses have uncovered new supporting evidence, while others have raised additional questions about his credibility. Recent government acknowledgements about unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP, have dramatically changed the context in which Lazar's story is understood. The Pentagon's official release of UFO videos in 2020 and subsequent congressional hearings have confirmed that the US military encounters aircraft with performance characteristics that seem to match what Lazar described decades earlier. While these official acknowledgements don't validate his specific claims about alien technology, they do confirm that craft exhibiting impossible flight characteristics are real phenomena worthy of serious scientific investigation. The modern echo of Lazar's story has been amplified by high-profile advocates who have brought his claims to mainstream attention. Joe Rogan's podcast interviews, Netflix documentaries, and coverage by serious journalists have introduced Lazar's story to millions of people who had never heard of him before. This exposure has brought both new believers and new skeptics to the ongoing debate about his credibility. Scientific developments in the decades since Lazar's initial revelations have made some of his claims seem less impossible than they appeared in 1989. Advances in metamaterials research, quantum mechanics, and theoretical physics have opened new possibilities for technologies that manipulate gravity, space-time, and electromagnetic fields in ways that were purely theoretical. When Lazar first described them, the creation and study of element 115 moscovium has remained one of the most compelling aspects of Lazar's modern legacy. While scientists have successfully created atoms of this element, they exist for only milliseconds and in quantities far too small to power a spacecraft. However, theoretical research continues into the possibility of creating stable isotopes of super-heavy elements that might exhibit the properties Lazar described. Modern analysis of the flight characteristics Lazar attributed to alien craft has revealed that his descriptions were remarkably prescient. Current UAP sightings by military personnel describe objects that exhibit identical behaviors: instantaneous acceleration, right-angled turns at high speed, and the ability to transition seamlessly between air and water. The consistency between Lazar's 1989 descriptions and modern military UAP reports is striking and unexplained. The digital preservation of evidence has allowed modern researchers to analyze details from Lazar's original interviews and documentation with tools that weren't available at the time. Voice stress analysis, micro-expression analysis, and detailed scrutiny of his technical drawings have provided new insights into both his credibility and the sophistication of his claims. Social media has also enabled real-time collaboration between witnesses and researchers in ways that have enhanced the investigation of UAP phenomena. When unusual activity is spotted near Area 51 or other classified facilities, information can be shared instantly across global networks, allowing for coordinated observation and documentation that was impossible in Lazar's era. The modern echo has also brought new challenges to Lazar's story. Advanced analysis of his educational claims has revealed additional discrepancies, while digital archaeology has uncovered aspects of his background that cast doubt on various elements of his narrative. The same technology that has provided new supporting evidence has also made it easier to fact-check his claims in unprecedented detail. Corporate and academic research into exotic propulsion systems has accelerated dramatically in recent years, with serious scientists and engineers investigating concepts that were once considered purely theoretical. While none of these programs have achieved the breakthrough technologies that Lazar claimed to have seen, the fact that such research is now openly discussed in scientific journals suggests that his technical descriptions weren't entirely impossible. The modern military's acknowledgement of encounters with craft exhibiting extraordinary performance has created a new framework for understanding Lazar's claims. Whether these phenomena represent alien technology, foreign adversary capabilities, or something else entirely, their official recognition has moved the discussion from conspiracy theory to national security concern. The echo of Lazar's story continues to evolve as new generations discover his claims through digital media and assess them using contemporary knowledge and technology. Some find his story more credible than ever, while others view it as an interesting historical curiosity that has been surpassed by real developments in UAP research. As you settle into sleep tonight, consider how the modern echo of an extraordinary story can take on a life of its own, spreading across digital networks and evolving with each retelling. Bob Lazar's claims, whether true or false, have become part of our cultural DNA, shaping how we think about government secrecy, alien visitation, and the possibilities of advanced technology. The modern world provides both better tools for investigating extraordinary claims and more sophisticated methods for creating compelling hoaxes. In this environment, Lazar's story continues to echo across decades, neither definitively proven nor conclusively debunked, remaining one of the most persistent mysteries in the history of UFO research. The echo grows stronger with each passing year, as new evidence emerges and new technologies make yesterday's impossibilities seem like tomorrow's realities. Whether Bob Lazar was a prophet of cosmic contact or a master of modern mythology, his story continues to resonate in ways that suggest we have not yet heard the final echoes of his extraordinary claims. Chapter 14, Epilogue. The Unfinished Secret. The desert wind carries many secrets across the Nevada landscape tonight, whispering stories that began long before humans walked this earth and will continue long after our civilizations have crumbled to dust. In this vast expanse of alkali flats and distant mountains, under a canopy of stars that stretches to infinity, the story of Area 51 and Bob Lazar's shocking revelations reaches not an end, but a moment of quiet reflection. We have traveled together through the labyrinth of claims and counterclaims, through technical descriptions that strain the boundaries of known physics, and through human dramas that reveal both the nobility and frailty of those who dare to speak uncomfortable truths or elaborate untruths. The journey has taken us from underground hangars carved from living rock to the highest levels of government secrecy, from the discovery of impossible elements to the persecution of those who claim to have touched alien technology. What have we learned in this exploration? Perhaps the most profound lesson is that the truth, whatever it may be, is far more complex than either believers or skeptics initially imagined. Bob Lazar emerges from our investigation neither as a clear hero nor an obvious fraud, but as something more human and more mysterious, man whose story contains elements so compelling and contradictions so troubling that it defies simple categorization. The technical aspects of his claims have proven remarkably Element 115 exists, as he predicted 14 years before its discovery. The flight characteristics he attributed to alien craft match those described in modern military UAP reports. The facilities and transportation systems he described have been confirmed by subsequent revelations and investigations. Yet the educational credentials that should have qualified him for such work remain unverified, and the extraordinary nature of his claims continues to challenge the boundaries of credibility. The desert remembers everything, and it has witnessed the gradual transformation of Lazar's story from sensational revelation to cultural phenomenon to historical curiosity that refuses to fade into obscurity. Each year brings new evidence and new questions, new technologies that make his claims seem either more plausible or more fantastic, new generations of researchers who approach his story with fresh perspectives and sophisticated analytical tools. Perhaps the most significant development in recent years has been the government's acknowledgement that craft exhibiting extraordinary performance characteristics are indeed operating in our airspace, whether these represent alien visitation, foreign adversary technology, or something else entirely. Their official recognition has moved discussions of advanced aerospace phenomena from the realm of conspiracy theory into the sphere of legitimate national security concern. This shift in official acknowledgement creates new context for evaluating Lazar's claims. If the government was indeed studying recovered alien technology in the 1980s, the secrecy surrounding such programs would have been absolute, and anyone revealing such information would have faced the full weight of the national security apparatus. The harassment, legal troubles, and systematic discrediting that Lazar experienced would be exactly what one might expect for someone who had violated the most sensitive oaths in the intelligence community. Yet questions remain. If Lazar's story was true, why did he come forward at all? The personal cost was enormous and the benefits minimal. If his story was false, why has it proven so durable and so resistant to definitive debunking? The lack of clear resolution after more than 3 decades suggests that we are dealing with something more complex than simple truth or falsehood. The unfinished secret that Bob Lazar claimed to have revealed may be unfinished for good reason. Some truths may be too profound for immediate acceptance, requiring decades or centuries for human consciousness to expand enough to accommodate them. Other stories may be too compelling to abandon even when evidence suggests they are not entirely accurate, because they fulfill deep psychological needs for meaning, mystery, and cosmic significance. The Nevada desert has seen many secrets come and go. It witnessed the first atomic tests that split atoms and illuminated the dawn of the nuclear age. It saw the birth of stealth technology that made aircraft invisible to radar. It has hosted the testing of hypersonic vehicles that push the boundaries of atmospheric flight. Each of these developments was once impossible, then classified, then gradually revealed to transform human civilization. Perhaps the secret that Bob Lazar claimed to have exposed will follow a similar trajectory. Perhaps somewhere in the underground facilities carved into the desert mountains, technologies are indeed being studied that will eventually transform human understanding of physics, propulsion, and our place in the universe. Or perhaps the real secret is more subtle, that the human imagination is capable of creating stories so detailed and compelling that they become more influential than factual reality. The stars above the Nevada desert have witnessed the entire drama unfold from Lazar's first public statements through decades of investigation, debate, and analysis. They have seen believers make pilgrimages to the desert to witness phenomena that might confirm their deepest hopes about cosmic contact. They have observed skeptics arrive with instruments and expertise designed to debunk claims that strain credibility. Both groups have left changed by their encounter with a mystery that refuses to yield simple answers. As you rest tonight, consider that some secrets may be destined to remain unfinished, not because they lack resolution, but because their true significance lies in the questions they raise rather than the answers they provide. Bob Lazar's story has opened minds to possibilities that extend far beyond the specific details of his claims. It has challenged us to consider what we would do if confronted with evidence that overturned our most basic assumptions about reality. It has forced us to examine the balance between healthy skepticism and dangerous, closed-mindedness, the unfinished secret whispers in the desert wind, reminding us that the universe is far stranger and more wonderful than our current understanding suggests. Whether Bob Lazar touched alien technology or simply touched something deep in the human psyche that yearns for cosmic connection, his story continues to echo across the years. Neither fully believed nor completely dismissed. In the end, perhaps that is the most appropriate conclusion for a story that began in the shadows of the world's most classified facility. Some secrets are meant to remain unfinished, existing in the liminal space between fact and fiction, between the known and the unknowable, between the desert earth and the infinite stars. The Nevada wind continues to whisper its secrets to those brave enough to listen. And the mystery of Area 51 and Bob Lazar's shocking UFO story remains as compelling today as it was on that desert evening in 1989 when one man stepped forward to share what he claimed was the most important secret in human history. Sleep well and dream of possibilities that stretch beyond the horizon of current knowledge, into realms where the impossible becomes inevitable and the unfinished secrets of the universe wait patiently to be discovered by those bold enough to seek them out. The story continues. Somewhere in the desert darkness, under stars that have seen everything and remember all, end